Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Rick Tell in the Box webcast. Our special guest is Steve Marcantonio. Steve is a Grammy Award winning engineer, formerly from New Jersey, but we won't hold that against him. Uh, and he's been in Nashville for quite a while. When did you first come to Nashville, Steve?
It was around May of '87.
May of '87.
Yeah, Rodney Crowd called me out here to work with Roseanne Cash.
Well, that's great. And so you liked it and you stayed. Well, is that when you came? Well, no, when did you move to Nashville?
Well, I first got an apartment here when my son was born in '92.
Okay.
Because '87, were you around here in '87?
No, I didn't get here till 2000.
Yeah, yeah. You see, growing up, even though I grew up in Elizabeth, New Jersey, you would know East Coast. You can't get the food like you can in the East Coast here, and especially in '87, I couldn't even get a good sandwich, so I had
Right.
to
No, they had Chef
travel.
Boyardee was the Italian
Yeah. So I
food.
commuted for 5 years, man. I didn't buy this house till '95, but I've been established here since '87 for sure.
Right. Cool. Very good. Very good. Okay, so um, you started in the recording world at one of the most famous recording studios in New York City, the Record Plant,
Hmm.
and that was 1978, I believe.
Yes.
And were you hired by Roy Cicala?
Yes, I was. Yep.
Yes. I'd like to talk about Roy for a minute. I'm a,
Please.
I,
Love
uh,
that.
I never asked you, but I imagine that he was a big influence on you, as a person and also as an engineer, and he was one of the giants, of recording. Give us a few reminiscences about Roy Cicala.
Well, I mean, like you said, he put his stamp of sound on me as a young kid, as he did with Jimmy Iovine and Shelly Akis, and had an influence on a lot of successful people. But he recorded the Four Seasons. My cousin was in the Four Seasons, and I showed interest in working in the studio. So my cousin said, "You want to meet Roy Cicala?" And I knew of that name already because Rick, as you can attest, eh, buying a record years ago, you'd buy the record, and the first thing I did because I was so into sound was I'd flip it over and see where it was recorded and who recorded it. So then I started noticing similar names, and I remember seeing Roy Cicala. So I, for sure, was like, "Wow, I want to meet Roy Cicala." So, and I met him in the studio. He was working on a Long Island band, the brothers. I forget their names. In any case, they were doing a version of Baby Love, and it was really cool. It was really rocking. The Rondinelli brothers, Bobby Rondinelli, drummer, and his brother. You never hear of the Rondinellis?
No,
I
I'm sorry.
remember that still. In any case, when I met Roy, I can tell we instantly hit it off. He took me in like a son. I spoke to him up to 3 months before he passed away, and I went through a lot with Roy, a lot of really funny times and a lot of kind of freaked out times because he was known to have a really bad temper, and I saw it in full range. But overall, he was a great guy.
Well, when he retired, he moved to Brazil, right?
Well, he was, yes, that's right. He
Was he
married.
Brazilian? Was he Brazilian by birth, or
No, no, he was Italian.
it was Italian? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He dated a woman. When I first started working there in '78, he used to take trips to Brazil. I'm not sure if he had already met his wife Lisa there or not, but he definitely met a woman in Brazil and used to go there often.
Okay.
And eventually got married. And I believe they had kids. I can't recall. I think she already had some. But in any case, he used to go back and forth,
Okay.
as you would going down the shore, he would go to Brazil.
Well, one thing I read recently, actually a day ago, because I was doing some research on Record Plant, is that I think the first album ever recorded, and Roy was the engineer, was Electric Ladyland, Jimi Hendrix. The first
When you say the first album ever recorded, what do you
at
mean?
Record Plant
Oh,
in New
oh,
York.
oh,
In New
okay.
York. And
Right.
that was engineered by Roy, and so I mean that was you know an
I'm not
iconic
sure.
album. I
Do you
mean,
know that for sure?
well, that's
You,
what it
you
said in on
okay.
Wikipedia.
Okay,
It
okay.
said that Roy was the engineer on the very first album ever recorded at Record Plant
Hmm.
Studios, Electric Ladyland, and that's in
Wow.
1968.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of Jimmy in Studio A at the record plant before Tom Hidley redid it. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I did some work for about a year at Electric Lady itself.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I remember one day they found unopened, well, since they were recorded, boxes of Jimi Hendrix recordings. They didn't even know
Wow.
existed. That was quite a thing.
Wow.
I was there when they found some of that stuff. Okay, so and well, what would you say in general did you learn in recording side from Roy that was that you still hold to today?
Well, believe it or not, um, the record plant was just like a school, almost like a military academy, because there was no rules or laws or anything like that, but you learned how to do it the record plant way. That goes from, coiling cables, to which mics to use, to what EQ to use, to how to deal with clients and artists, and how to, mark things down. We were very proficient on keeping notes and marking tape boxes and all that sort of thing. So I learned that at a very early age from Roy. Um, just I got my personality in a control room a lot through Roy. But besides that, his technique for recording, I've never seen again since then, because first of all, he used to slam his two track or his multi track. A kick drum, he would start in the red constantly. He used CBS limiters, Volumax limiters. So everything was always loud with Roy. And he also did a lot of tape flanging and tape echo. I observed at a young age, but I couldn't understand what he was doing. Not until years later did I understand what he was doing. So, and he did most all of John Lennon's solo stuff. And if you hear those song Mind Games, and we're done with this, put on Mind Games, Rick, and you'll hear the very, very beginning. There's like a 1K tone or 10K tone in reverb, and the what he was doing with the tape, it needed signal to start it so that when the song came in, it was going, and it was tone that injected that sound, and it made the record. That was pretty
Hmm,
cool.
okay,
And
interesting.
I'm sure somebody from Record Plant can explain that a lot better. I also saw Roy. Anton Fig was the drummer, and we did this song with Garland Jeffries, and Anton just did kick and snare and hi hat, and we had the overhead mics. And back then we did cut tracks on 5 tracks, cut drums on 5 tracks, kick, snare, overheads that included the toms and the hi hat.
Right,
And he wanted to overdub toms on the overhead tracks, so he
right,
pulled the
right.
erase head off a tape machine, and we recorded a different. We recorded the drum tracks on the overhead tracks, and that I've never seen anything like that ever again. That was pretty intense.
And also at the studio at the time was Shelly Yakis, right? You worked with Shelly, I'm sure.
Yes, yes.
Uh,
I was scheduled. I heard nothing. Well, I don't want to say horror stories, but Shelley was very strict with his seconds assistants,
mhm.
and he put a lot of pressure on you. And I saw myself on the schedule on a Friday night. I was scheduled to work with him on Monday, and I couldn't sleep that weekend. I was so scared, but it turned out fine, and I still see Shelley to this day, and he's got ears that no one else has. He hears things that no one else does.
So, and did you ever work with Jack Douglas?
Absolutely. Yes.
Right.
Loved working with Jack. Excuse me. Jack was he's still active. Him and Jay Messina. He did a lot of work with Jay Messina, is a very dear friend of mine. But Jack is not only, he produces stuff that he works on, but he also has a hand in engineering. In
Mhm.
some cases he does all the engineering, or if he's working with Jay, he might get a sound on something while Jay's working on something else. So
Let's now get to the December 8th, 1980, right? Isn't that it?
yep, yep.
1980. Um, Now, I believe Roy was working with John Lennon at the time. Were you working with him too?
No, no, Roy wasn't
Oh, he
working.
wasn't?
It was Jack Douglas. As you know, Jack produced Double Fantasy, and when they recorded Double Fantasy, they recorded about 30 tracks to be used for two albums. The second album would have been Milk and Honey.
Right.
And Jack was the producer, not Roy. And
Well, I
Jack
thought maybe Roy
engineered.
was the engineer. Who engineered it?
Oh,
Jack?
Jack engineered as
Oh,
well.
he
Yep.
engineered too. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, were you assisting Jack
I was assisting Jack. Yep.
on that
It
walking
was,
on thin ice?
in 1980, Rick, we got this thing called a BTX unit, and it was like a white console with all these buttons to sync up two multitracks.
Okay, I remember that. Maybe.
And I had worked for about 8 months on the Blues Brothers project soundtrack,
Uh-huh.
and I got to know that thing really well working on that record. And that's how I got this gig working with John and Yoko because they were working on that, and it was my turn to work with them.
So
So
they
yeah,
used two 24-track machines?
224 tracks. Yep, yep.
Did you ever hear of a studio at that time called Eras, E-R-A-S?
No, no.
Okay. That was also in Manhattan. They had two 24-track Telefunken machines,
Oh wow. Yeah.
and they had them in sync. And I did an album there with, Mike Fondelli?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Mike and I co-produced and worked together on two projects, one at Electric Lady and one at Eros.
Eros. Yeah,
Uh,
the thing too about that the two machines is that it took a full at least 5 seconds, I'd say, to link up, and we had Ampex 1200s, and there was no muting on the heads,
mm,
so you heard like when you would hit play, you would hear them gradually syncing up, and it was pretty interesting.
yeah,
Yeah. So it
we,
was very cumbersome doing punches. You have to stop and
oh,
roll back and all that. So,
you know, with today's technology, the younger people who never had to deal with what we had to deal with
yeah,
machines and calibration and all this stuff,
yeah,
they take it, they don't know how easy they have it.
you know.
Really.
Listen to you. I didn't say that. You said that, okay?
I'll say it to everybody. I mean,
Hey, if we had this technology back then, we would love it. Are you kidding me? I love the new
of course,
technology. But
yeah, yeah.
but the only thing is, Rick, having said that, what you said, I do explain this to students that I talk to, is that when we made records years ago, we all had something to do with it. Because as an assistant engineer, we didn't have remotes. So I had to run the tape machine constantly. And then,
Right.
and in mixing, you wouldn't know what you had until you heard it back because we're working on two track. So back then, when you did something in the studio, it would last weeks and months, and at the end, you felt this accomplishment. It's like you were like, "Wow!" You hear it on the radio, you go, "Man, I remember doing the
Oh yeah.
guitar solo for 10 hours that day, and this and that's gone from record making nowadays. Which it's if you've never experienced it, it's not a problem.
Well, what I think is different is that in those days we had, not everybody had 24 track machines.
Right.
I started out with I think I started in '78 at Delta Recording, but I wasn't an engineer. I mean, I was more of a producer type, and they made me the sales manager too because I was schmoozing with all the other producers. So I got all the jingle people in, and that was good money back then. In the
Right.
'70s, they actually had residuals. The biggest money you could make
Yeah.
was with jingles. I mean,
I
that
got on a couple contracts. Yep.
yeah, that was the money. As a matter of fact, the producers, even if they couldn't sing, would say they sang and put their name on as one of the singers, because that was where the royalties were. I
Sure.
mean,
Sure.
anyway, so I was like a sales manager, but I learned not as much as you because I was doing more music, but I learned like by watching the engineers, and trying.
Right, right. Oh, me too. Yes, I watched and listened and learned, and that's how I got to form a sound. When you're starting out in the business, you have to learn how to hear or what you're hearing and how to translate that.
And also what I was going to say before was that one of the big differences today, okay, is that back then, like I said, we didn't have unlimited tracks. So a lot of the work in the sound was done before it went into the tape.
Right.
It was
Sure.
put,
Yeah. Yeah.
it was cut to tape with the sound, and there are
Right.
still
Oh yeah.
legends of engineers.
Right.
Some still alive, some recently deceased, like Jeff Emmerich, and stuff like who But people like Al Schmidt, I mean, they get their sound, and when that way the mix is like much easier
Yeah.
because it's already there. Now today, everybody does well. We'll fix it in the mix. We just record it, and we have all these options. And although that has its good points, as you probably know, you could go crazy with dealing with 100 tracks, that all need to, to be recorded. I mean, to be mixed a certain way and whatever. But the fact is that back then you had to make decisions.
Right. Yes.
You had to
That's the
make
biggest thing.
decisions.
Nowadays, you can put off your decisions.
It was great working with all these great people, engineers,
Yeah.
and so now you have become one of the big honchos here in
Oh, come
Nashville,
on.
and which is pretty good from a boy from New Jersey. That's all I gotta say.
Right on.
Anyway, so on December 8th, what exact were you working with John on December 8th?
Yeah, we had, like I was telling you earlier, it was today, December 1st, when we first started.
Oh, okay.
Jack brought in the tapes, and we listened down to what they recorded originally months before and started eliminating certain tracks. John added some tracks, and so that week, from the 1st to the 8th, we did recording. John played guitar and synth, Yoko sang. And then I believe we started mixing maybe that Saturday, all the way to Sunday. And then on Sunday, I can't recall exactly what time John and Yoko used to show up. It could have been noon, or maybe that Sunday. It might have been later because we worked through to like 4 or 5 in the Monday morning.
Okay.
And then we all went home and came back later that evening just to finish up the mix. And I can't recall the time. It might have been 8 or 9 that I said goodnight to them as they started to head down the elevator. And once again, it felt like an hour later that we heard on Monday Night Football that he was gone. And
Right, right,
we
right.
were all shocked. Everybody stopped working because it was a full house. Willie Nile was there. I remember him being there. I forget the other people working there. But
So he wasn't recording the day on December 8th.
no, we were just closing out a mix. We
Okay,
were closing out a mix.
because then that the Wikipedia stuff, which isn't always accurate,
Right.
said that he was recording "Walking on Thin Ice"
Yeah, that's the song we were doing.
at on December 8th. So he was.
Well, yeah, yeah.
So
Well,
was
like
he
I
at
said,
the studio?
we brought. I'm sorry.
Was he at the studio on December 8th during the day?
Yes, yes.
So he was
During the day.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I believe they had. You know what it was? They had an interview that's they keep talking about at the Dakotas with someone from the BBC, I believe,
Yes, I remember that.
around 4 or 5. So they might have been at the studio about 6, and we might have made some tweaks, whatever. Um, and then I'm probably he probably took copies home. John may have had a reel to reel. Maybe I made him a reel to reel. I don't recall that, but I do know that I had another session to do that evening, and I was setting up a vocal for another artist that Jack, ironically, was producing. So we were going from working with John to doing another session that night at 9 o'clock. And that's when we heard the news and everybody stopped, and it was just Jack rushed to the hospital where he was at, Roosevelt Hospital, I believe, and it was pretty shocking.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I think it's time for us to
Great. Yes, I
call
have
it
another
a
Zoom in 20 minutes. So.
day.
But this was a
And,
blast, Rick. I
yeah,
mean, it's great talking with you because we're from the same era, and I dig your style. We're both Italian.
yeah, yeah. Well, I want to thank Steve Marcantonio for an excellent run down the memory lane of the record plant and John Lennon.
Yeah.
Um, was John Lennon a very pleasant person to work
Very, very pleasant. He was. I mean, I took a walk that the night before he died. I says, Jack, I want to get out and get some air, and he says, hold on, I'll come with you. And it's like, what? So just me and him taking a walk in New York City at
with?
4 in the morning on a Monday. It was pretty interesting. But he was very down to earth. Really, really cool guy.
That's great. That's great. Well, we all love John Lennon,
Yes, we did.
and It was a terrible tragedy, one of the worst in rock and roll history.
Yeah.
I saw the Beatles live in Forest Hills,
Mm.
and that was incredible. It was a I'll never forget that experience. That's
Yeah.
another story.
That's another story.
That's
Yes.
another story. But it was great reminiscing with you and going over
You too, my
technology and
dear friend.
everything. And we'll
All
do
right.
it again soon, okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely, man.
All
All
right.
right.
Take
Take care.
care. Good
All right.
talking to you.
Ciao.
Bye bye.